And as long as you're a good scientist, as long as you have the knowledge and the skills and the passion to succeed in that role, someone will recognize that.
Hey everyone, welcome to SwitchHub TV. It's your host, Wei and John. Today on the show, we have my good friend, Ricky Lee. Ricky's worked as a microbiologist in food and pharmaceuticals. He has experience in both contract and government laboratories and has most recently transitioned into manufacturing. Ricky, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me, guys.
So let's just get some context first off. Where did you study? What did you study? Just to get some background.
Okay, so I did a Bachelor of Molecular Biotechnology at Sydney University, and I majored in microbiology and did my honours project in microbiology as well.
Yeah, and so is there, so like when you were studying science, right, there were obviously a lot of different directions you could have gone in, like, you know, you could have done like biochemistry or genetics or microbiology. Like, what made you want to do microbiology?
I think for me, I've always been a biologist, whether it be an interest in animals, plants, insects, or whatever. I've always had an interest in biology. For my 7th birthday, actually, I begged my mum to buy me a microscope. And I think that kind of set everything in motion where I love biology. I had a microscope since I was 7 years old, and it kind of put me down that path of microbiology and studying things that, you know, all is there, but we just can't see them. And I find that's really interesting. So when I was given the opportunity to study microbiology at university, I loved it. I took every opportunity to focus my,
I've known you for so long, but you never told me that before.
Yeah, probably
but that's
never told you
interesting.
that.
And
it's a little bit embarrassing, so I wouldn't do that.
It's microbiology at heart, microbiologist at heart. No, and so because I know you. I know you very well, so I know like the next part of what happened, but like I just want you to talk through it as well. You didn't actually go into micro or science straight after uni. So can you just talk about that? Like, why did you do that? And how was that like going from like, okay, so I always had a dream of like, you know, studying science and being microbiology, and then straight out of uni, not doing that. So can you just talk about that? Like, what did you do? How did that feel? And what was that about?
I suppose I didn't go into science immediately, not through a lack of trying. I was applying for heaps of jobs, applying every single day for different jobs, looking for jobs in science. But unfortunately, when I graduated, it was the GFC around that period, and there was very little jobs available. So when I started looking for jobs, I was actually a little disheartened by what was on offer. A lot of weekend jobs, a lot of casual jobs, a lot of contracts, nothing really permanent and nothing really to the level that I was expecting. So I actually started looking elsewhere. So what I did, I started looking in IT jobs because my other passion is computers and technology. So when I started looking for IT jobs, I found there was a lot more jobs out there, a lot better rates, a lot better conditions. And I actually started a career in IT. And I actually stayed at doing a contract IT job for about 2 years. And the money was great. And I do actually miss the money, really, to tell you the truth. But contract jobs are a bit hard because you don't have that kind of, you know, strong kind of...
that security, right?
Security, yeah.
So what kind of role in that IT job that you've applying? Is it like coding, analysis?
It was more like first level support. So we were technical support for a large IT project. And this IT project was at Qantas, was basically redefining the whole check-in system from freight management all the way down to customer management. So there was a huge IT project over 10 years, several $1 billion spent. And we were the first level support for all the coders, all the project testers, everything. So basically if they had any IT issues, it would come through us.
And then, so, sorry, John, did you have a question? Because I just had a follow-up for that.
Yeah,
so
just
like,
follow it up.
And then what, you know, so was your contract at an end? Is that why you sort of thought, okay, like my contract coming to an end, like maybe the GFC, that was like the end of the GFC, right? And then you were thinking, okay, I'm going to try and do what I really wanted to do now. So what was that?
I got renewed a couple of times through my employment at Qantas. Every time it got renewed, I got a pay bump and made me realize how great the job was. But towards the end of the project is when they started cutting all the contracts. And unfortunately, they could not renew my contract as pretty much the project had finished and they no longer needed that testing support. So I came to this kind of predicament where I had to decide whether I want to follow my IT career or go down the path that I originally chosen as a kid, really, when I was 7 years old. So I made a decision to actually follow my science passion and follow biology and microbiology.
Yeah. And then so okay. So let's just like put that all into context, right? So then you went to uni to do science. You spent like a couple years in IT. And then when you started going the job hunt to try and get into micro or science or whatever it be, how was that like when you were going for interviews and stuff and you were putting your resume out there, how was the response? Because I don't think too many people would have been enthusiastic about you, considering that you didn't have any actual
Experience.
Like applied like lab experience or something like that. So what was that like? What was your experience like? How did you actually get into it in the end?
Well, it was actually really tough. I applied for even more jobs than I had ever applied for. I was offering my services as, you know, free work experience to do a couple of days a week just to secure a job in these places. And nobody would give me the time of day. I just had no experience. I wasn't a fresh graduate. And for me, it was quite disheartening. Like, I felt like I knew a lot of stuff, but I wasn't able to land a job in the science field. And the only way that I was able to make a break in science was through a friend. So that networking aspect, someone that I actually studied microbiology with and did my honors project with. That person was actually leaving a job and asked me to take her job. So only through that connection was I able to land a job in science.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? And do you think, like, let's say if you kept looking for like would it have got to a point, like, let's say if you were searching at like 3 months, 4 months, 5 months or 6 months or whatever, and you couldn't get into micro or science, do you think you might have just gone down the road of IT and just ended up in IT and still be in IT?
I think so. I was actually pursuing a kind of my own little business, like a little eBay online business. So
yeah,
actually quite a long span of time between finishing up in IT and starting in science. Potentially 18 months, I believe. So it was a fair while, but I was making money through my own little business ventures.
Yeah. And then, yeah, John, just feel free to jump in at any time, but I just have all these questions in my head.
Yeah,
so like, so when you started working so you finally did it, you got into microbiology, you started, as we both know, at a food contract testing laboratory. How was that? Like, did it feel like you thought it would? Like, oh, I finally did it. I'm actually working in a lab now as like a microbiologist, or more technically like a laboratory technician.
What are your thoughts on when you finally got to where you want?
I actually really enjoyed it. I think having a hiatus from science for like 4 years and then going back into the lab, donning that lab coat, streaking plates and, you know, seeing bacteria grow was like, I realized to myself, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I've been doing it ever since. So I think it kind of rekindled that passion in me, which I was kind of blinded by a bit of money and dollar signs, which we tend to get in our eyes sometimes.
Yeah. Ricky and I have a bit of an inside joke. It's about the passion. Don't think about the money, it's passion. And the next part, right, is so you did contract, you worked in a contract food lab for a bit, obviously you gained some skills, some practical skills and that. And then after that, you transitioned into a government lab for a little bit. And so I guess without going into any confidential details or whatever, how was that like? So the difference of working in a contract lab versus like a government lab, because I don't think people know the difference, because I think in our industry, like, you either tend to stay in like private or you just work in public your whole life, and people don't know, not too many people have experienced like contract versus like a government lab. So what was your like experience there? What was that like?
I think working in a contract lab really gives you a lot of experience in all facets of the science that you're studying or you're working. You really get to see all levels of it, from washing up, media making, technician work, weighing out samples, testing samples, reading results, generating reports. And I think that gives you a really good basis for, a kind of strong foundation in science. and that scientific kind of thinking. When you go into a government job, I think the pace is completely different, and you're very highly defined by what your role is. So if you're a technician, you only do your technician work. If you're a media person, you only do your media work. And I think that high definition of your role kind of puts blinkers on and doesn't give you the true science experience, I believe. I do, however, think that working in the government is fantastic, but it depends on what type of career path you want. If you want to expand your knowledge, learn about all facets of science, all facets of your kind of industry, I think private industry offers a lot more to learn. Unless you want to climb the ranks in the government and raise to the ministry level, become that kind of politician, I think they're very different worlds. If you want to stay in a nice, cozy, cushy career with lots of pay, easy lifestyle, good work-life balance, then the government's a fantastic place to work. If given the opportunity, I'd probably go back and do that cushy government job, but I think that now I've learned so much, I probably couldn't do that at this point in my life.
So I think like what I'm getting from you, it's based on your personality, like maybe even like what stage you are in your career, and things like that, right?
Yeah. If I was winding down in my career, I'd love to go to a government lab. If I was trying to learn more about science, become that better scientist that I've always wanted to be, then it's probably not the ideal job to have. There's a certain level that I believe you can only get to in the government before you start becoming a politician, really.
Yeah, but I guess you're still grateful for the experience to have dabbled in like the government sector for a bit and just to experience what that was like, because you must have learned other things that you wouldn't have been able to had you just stayed in like private or commercial or contract lab.
So I was actually working for New South Wales Health. So the work that we were doing was actually in looking at food outbreaks, which was really, really interesting. But unfortunately, the lab just didn't have much work to do, really. So unfortunately,
unfortunately, for you, but fortunately for society in general, because that just means that there's not a lot of outbreaks, right?
Yeah. So we did really important work. It was really interesting. I learned a lot about food safety and kind of regulation in New South Wales. But yeah, I think for me, it worked out better to progress in my career further.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'd probably be in there in that job for a lot longer.
Yeah. Yeah. John, did you just want to jump in? Because I just feel like I've been...
No, that's fine. I mean, all the questions are very valuable and all the answers from Ricky is very valuable. Thank you for sharing. The only question is that I've heard a lot from Wei that you've been into 2 different careers, but I've seen your profile that Wei have sent to us as well. Basically, you also had a 3rd one, which is customer service. So can you tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit more about this role? I mean, you've been jumping to 3 different careers now. How did it make you feel?
I think it's given me a really good baseline of like what I can do in my jobs. Like having IT, working in science is fantastic. Everyone thinks that you're a genius. When there's ever an IT issue, they'll come straight to me. Oh, Ricky, can you fix this? Yes, okay, I'll fix this. And I think the customer service background that I had throughout uni, and actually maintained this customer service role for about 13 years. So even after I finished uni, so this was just a casual job on the weekends. Even after I finished uni, I still maintained this job and only recently quit that job due to work requirements.
Right.
I think that customer service background really gives you the skills, the interpersonal skills to, succeed in any role. And, I think everyone should probably take that opportunity to work in something other than just science, because if you expand your skill set, not just in science, but in customer service or IT or whatever your passion might be, I think it will benefit your career no matter what.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it could be argued that your communication skills and your ability to connect with people wouldn't have been the same had you not had that customer service role.
Yeah. I think having that customer service role really opened me up a bit. I was a very shy person. I'm a very nervous person. I don't know if you guys can tell.
No, actually,
not at all. John's meeting you for the first time. He can't tell.
Yeah, definitely, I couldn't tell.
So the other interesting transition, right, is, and I like how John asked that in terms of the diversity of the experience. But most recently, in the last few years, notably, you've transitioned into a pharmaceutical manufacturing role, where you worked as a microbiologist for a bit, but then you sort of got promoted into a more like a QA validation role. And so I want to know, what's that been like? So there's a few different transitions there, right? You went from food to pharmaceutical, and then you went from like contract lab, like contract/consulting, to manufacturing. And I think that was your first manufacturing. Is this your first manufacturing gig as well? So what's that been like in terms of going from food? I know it's a bit of a loaded question, but like going from food to pharma, but also like contract to manufacturing, and the differences there.
I think at the bare bones of it is that you still rely on those basic micro skills. No matter where you work, what industry you work for, if you're in microbiology and you go into another microbiology job, the core skills that you've learned in microbiology is going to help you succeed in that role. It's how you build upon that and how you apply those microbiology skills that makes a difference. For me, going from a senior microbiologist in a contract lab to a more of a, not junior, but an entry-level technician role in a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility was quite easy. I thought that I had enough knowledge in terms of microbiology to succeed in that role, and all I had to do was apply the manufacturing principles, the pharmaceutical principles to those core sets of skills. I think as I've worked at this pharmaceutical company, I've really expanded my knowledge of manufacturing, and I think my microbiology skills have kind of morphed into microbiology, engineering, and quality assurance kind of a role where I'm not just doing lab work anymore, but critically analyzing different aspects of the manufacturing facility in terms of a microbiology perspective.
Yeah. And like personally, I know as well, so I just want to hear your 2 cents of it. Is going from contract to manufacturing, the scope is completely different. It's like a much wider scope. So can you just talk about that specifically, like manufacturing versus contract labs? Because I think a lot of our audience would be interested in that, and especially a lot of John and a lot of people that us three know have just exclusively remained in the contract laboratory scene and have never dabbled into manufacturing. So can you just talk about, what was that experience like? Because it's a totally different game.
It is. Like I said, though, it is based on those core principles. So if you have a great understanding of microbiology, I believe you can apply that to like any manufacturing facility or food production facility. Those kind of core ideals of aseptic technique and, HACCP, that kind of analysis of why we do things in microbiology, why we swab certain things, why we take certain water samples. I think in a contract testing laboratory, you only see that side of things where you might get the sample, but you got to think critically and you got to think, why am I getting this sample? Where has this sample come from? What information does this sample provide to me? And if you think like that while working in a contract testing laboratory, it really opens up the opportunities for you to step into a quality role where you're critically analyzing why you're testing these things. You're thinking from the other side where the quality associate is asking you to test it. Question, why are we testing it? What does it provide to the company? And I think that will allow that transition much more easily.
Yes, definitely a good insight.
And I guess the other aspect I'm wondering about as well, because I sort of experienced this myself, and just again want to hear 2 cents about it, going from like food to pharmaceuticals, because I think we all know, and our audience will know, that pharma regulations are different to like food industry. So then what was that like? I mean, of course, like you said, you had that core skill set, you had that knowledge, but then to apply that in a different setting where the rules of the game are different. And what was that like in terms of like your experience and I guess the opportunities and the things that you learned? And go on, John.
And how do you adapt to it? That's the thing.
Yeah, so I think if you're a good scientist, these kind of GDP requirements and GAP requirements should be kind of obvious to most good scientists. if you can think like that, we should always be making sure that everything we do is done perfectly. Everything that we do is signed, dated, etc. No documentation errors. And I think if you have that mindset, even from the earliest point you step into your science career, it will allow for that transition really easily, because you're thinking scientifically. You're thinking, I need to provide objective evidence. I need to provide the facts. I need to sign and date these things. I need to be accountable. These things need to be accurate, and they need to be reviewed by an auditor and acceptable. So if you have that mindset from the start of your science career, I think it's a lot easier to kind of succeed in all the different kind of roles, whether they be contract testing laboratories, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, or anything like that. As long as you're accountable for your work and you understand the importance of good documentation and the requirements of your pharmacopoeia or your food standards, or whatever they may be, I think that's really important for your career.
Yeah, no, I like that, I guess. I know I get in sort of, in our industry, sometimes we do sort of talk about the differences of like pharma people and food people, but in the end, it's sort of the same. It's based on the core set of principles and just guiding notions of like, yeah, what's correct? How do we demonstrate due diligence and things like that? John, did you have any other?
I suppose the enforcement level is a lot higher in the pharmaceutical. Yeah. But at the end of the day, the core principles are the same.
Yeah, yeah.
It applies the same, definitely, 100%.
We're scientists at the end of the day.
So the only thing I would like to ask of you, Ricky, is do you have any tips for those who are trying to get work experience?
Okay. From my experience, I think there's two main tips that I'd give. Firstly is just try to get your foot in that door, whether it be starting at the very bottom of a contract testing laboratory. You might be making media, you might be washing dishes, you might be literally doing 2 days a week unpaid work experience, but it puts your foot in the door. And as long as you're a good scientist, as long as you have the knowledge and the skills and the passion to succeed in that role, someone will recognize that and they will give you that opportunity. And I think that's the most important thing, because unfortunately the science industry is very crowded at the moment. So if you have that foot in the door and you prove yourself, you'll be given that opportunity. And I think the second important tip that I'll give is that the importance of networking should never be underestimated. Both of my roles within contract testing laboratory, so straight after I finished IT, and my pharmaceutical job have both been through networking. This has not been through my own skill, even though maybe I think so sometimes. It's actually
being too modest, Ricky.
through people that I know. So the contract testing laboratory was through a friend in microbiology that I studied with, and the pharmaceutical role was someone that I used to previously work with in a contract testing laboratory. So the importance of networking should never be underestimated.
Yeah.
And I think anyone in the industry should really be trying to communicate with others in the industry, make friends with people in your laboratories, whether they be university laboratories or even school laboratories or TAFE laboratories, just trying to network, get to know.
And I like that you brought up those 2 points to like finish up on this show, because it's sort of come around, right? Because when you were leaving uni, we were experiencing the GFC, and then now we're COVID-19, we're in another economic downturn. So it's sort of come full circle now, where we'll have this bunch of like graduates who are, sort of asking these sorts of questions. So I sort of like how you provided those insights of just trying to get your foot in the door first, and just trying to keep your network strong and things like that. But John, did you have any further questions?
That's all I have. It's very interesting to know, Ricky, in terms of the adaptation between 3 careers, and that those career paths actually merge into, it's adaptable. And you're right, using those beneficial skill set will actually help you succeed in not just the career, but in life as well.
Correct. Yeah. Important life skills to learn.
That's right.
Yeah. Thanks for your time, Ricky. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time, Ricky.
Thank you very much.
Have a good one.
Guys. You too. See you guys.